Jovan, Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha. I'm a reporter and analyst for Buha's Block. And welcome to another episode of Beyond the Block. Today we are going beyond the Lakers and discussing an all-time Game 1 between the Oklahoma City Thunder and San Antonio Spurs. The Spurs won 122-115 in double overtime in a game they controlled nearly wire to wire. They led 81% of the game. They take a 1-0 series lead in the Western Conference Finals and improve to 5-1 against Oklahoma City this season. This was just a classic game that will be replayed in future years on NBA Hardwood Classics. It surpassed all the hype. This was the first time that two teams were playing against each other that had won 62 plus games in the playoffs since Bulls Jazz 1998 NBA Finals. So we're talking about something that hasn't happened in nearly 30 years. So this is a heavyweight bout between two young teams who are the two best teams in the NBA. I'm not the first person to propose this notion, but I think this is the NBA Finals. Whichever team wins this series is going to go on and win the championship. Just an all-time performance from Victor Wembanyama, the best game of his young career, and a statement that he very well may be the best player in the world and ready to do the unthinkable of leading an NBA, leading a team to an NBA championship as a 22-year-old in year 3. No De'Aaron Fox tonight for the Spurs. He was a late scratch. Thunder got JDub back, but didn't matter. The Spurs, again, were in control of this game basically wire to wire, and they dominated the paint, they dominated the glass, they dominated the free throw battle, and they ultimately prevailed in double OT. Well, let's get into it. Shout out to the chat. Shout out to the late night gang. Appreciate you all. And appreciate you guys for tuning in to non-Laker stuff, as always. We have to start with Victor Wembanyama. I mean, I don't know what you do with him. This was a special performance. It's just, we got to look at 41 points, 24 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal, 3 blocks, 14 of 25 shooting, 1 for 2 on threes, including hitting a Steph Curry-esque. They said it was 28 feet. It felt further out than that, but the double bang shot that Steph Curry hit in 2016, Victor pulls up from there, hits that, or I forgot if it was a kick out or a pull up, but either way, hits that shot, and 9 offensive rebounds for him. So many big tip-ins and just his playing off of their fronting and the seals that he had down the stretch. Just a monster, epic performance from Victor Wembanyama. And I mean, I would put this up like this was probably the best game anyone has played this season. Again, certainly the best game he's had in his career. But when you think about the impact that he had defensively, I mean, to have a 40-20 game in the conference finals, that in and of itself is special. To do that against this caliber of defense, we're talking about one of the best modern defenses in NBA history. And then you're also talking about just all of the shots that he prevented from even being attempted. And that is the thing that really stands out here in terms of Wemby versus the Thunder offense. The Thunder just, like, there'll be occasionally breakdowns, and there was the late play where to force the first overtime where they drag Wemby out to the corner because Chet's in the corner. Spurs are up 2, and Shea's able, it comes off the Iverson cut, is able to drive, get the layup, and force the OT because Wemby doesn't want to rotate over and help with Chet in the corner. If Shea makes that pass, that's a wide open 3 for Chet. Chet hits potentially a game-winning shot, and San Antonio loses. So he doesn't rotate in that case. Like there were some breakdowns or some times where they were able to stretch Wemby out, but for the most part, it's just Wemby is, I mean, they're scram switching, keeping him close to the rim somewhere in the paint or in that vicinity. And you just see most guys are if they're getting past the initial line of defense, they are just coming up into Wemby, and there's nothing like no one wants to get their shot blocked like that. And so again, some guys challenged him, and Caruso had a nice finish around him, and there were some exceptions, but for the most part, like in the aggregate of the battle of Wemby versus the Thunder offense, Wemby and the Spurs won that battle, right? And there was a big disparity. I think going into the fourth quarter, it was like they were 16 of 50 with Wemby on the floor and 10 for 16 with him off. I don't have the updated numbers with the fourth quarter and OT. But I mean, you saw like the Luke Cornett minutes were a disaster, and San Antonio's got to figure that out because he was basically unplayable tonight. Only played 9 minutes. Wemby had to play, log very heavy minutes, especially with it going to double OT. But it was like, as long as Wemby was on the floor, San Antonio was at least treading water, if not winning their minutes. And ultimately, they were plus 16 in Wemby's 49 minutes in a game that they won by 7 in double OT. So it was basically, it was the Cornett minutes where they were -9 and were just bleeding points left and right. And that nearly ended up being the difference in the game. But the Spurs were able to close things out in OT. But I mean, Wemby, like, I know for some people, the hype has been overblown or premature, or there's been a little bit of like, what has he actually done? But he is passing every test so far in these playoffs. And you just see like the Spurs look like the best team in the NBA when he's on the floor, and they look rather pedestrian when he's off the floor. And we've seen that whether it was the game he left with the concussion or the game that he got ejected with the flagrant against Naz Reid. And it's like, this dude's just a monster. And like right now, I think he has the highest ceiling in the NBA. I don't think that's disputable. Like just the level that he can get to on both sides of the ball, and the way that he warps your defense and then also warps your offense. It's just his two-way impact right now is ridiculous. And he's only 22 years old in year 3. Like he could, I mean, theoretically should be going to an even higher level in multiple aspects of his game. But this was just like, I feel like you can remember with different guys, like with Kobe. I mean, let's even take it further back, right? Like with Jordan, he had the game against the Celtics where he dropped 60 plus in the playoffs, and that was sort of his arrival on the national stage. And then, some of those battles against the Cavs and then ultimately the Pistons, and like those first few years of Jordan really established who he was and who he was going to become. You have Kobe with the 2000 finals, and Shaq fouling out, and Kobe playing through, I believe he had a sprained ankle. I think it was game 4, and the performance that he had, and just, that first championship run. And then you have LeBron in 2007 with the 48 special in Detroit, where he scored, I think it was 25 straight, if I'm not mistaken, if not 25 or 28. And then that was like LeBron's moment of he's going up against one of the, at the time, best defenses of the era. And they had that stretch where they made all those conference finals in a row, and they'd already beaten LeBron, and he takes them down. And then you go Steph Curry, his big game at MSG, I think it was in the 2014 season, 2013 or 2014. Then also the double bang game. I mean, at that point, the double bang game, at that point, he had already won a championship, so and an MVP, but like it took Steph to like there's just something about that moment that was so iconic that took Steph almost to a different stratosphere. And it feels like this is like Wemby's had. So I think about the game early in the season against the Mavericks and AD, where he just dominated AD and dominated Dallas's monster front line. And he's had, and even in the playoffs, game 3 against Minnesota, like he's had moments, right? But this stage, conference finals against this defense, with his long-standing rivalry against Chet, OKC was undefeated up to this point in the playoffs, goes into their building and controls the game again, wire to wire, and just was clearly the best player on the floor. Like, I mean, Shea wasn't even the best Thunder player tonight. Alex Caruso was the best Thunder player tonight. So it just, I mean, I'm running out of superlatives to describe what Wemby's doing right now, but it's 41, 24, 3 blocks, and at least, I mean, turnarounds isn't a stat, but if it was, he's got at least 20 turnarounds of dudes dribbling into the paint, see he's there. All right, I got a U-turn and reset the offense. And just, I mean, I think I don't even know how to describe what we just saw, but what I will say, sign me up for 6 more games of this. I would love to watch a 7-game series between these two teams. Speaking of Shea, we saw, like, I think a continuation of some of the stuff that the Lakers did against Shea in the Western Conference semifinals. So 24 points on only 7 to 23 shooting, 2 for 7 on threes, 8 for 9 at the free throw line, 3 rebounds, 12 assists, 5 steals, 1 block, 4 turnovers. So you look at the 4 turnovers, which is uncharacteristic for Shea, and he did have a couple of those games in the Lakers series. And then the 7 for 23 shooting, which he, kind of similar to a couple of those Lakers performances as well. He partly made up for it with the 12 assists and the 5 steals, but Shea was not close to himself. And as someone who watched and covered that entire Lakers series, he did break out in a big way in Game 4. And as Mark Daigneault said at times in that series, like, his impact and the gravity that he has forcing double teams and allowing OKC to play with an advantage, that's not showing up in the box score necessarily, but it is, if you're watching, like, clearly Shea is still altering the defense just with his mere presence. And there was an element of that tonight in with some of San Antonio with their trapping or doubling against him, and OKC playing out with an advantage. But the issue is, a lot of times when they're playing against an advantage, Wemby is the last line of defense. And as we saw throughout the game, when you are trying to attack Wemby, like, you could have a 2-on-1 against Wemby or even a 3-on-1 against Wemby, and Wemby's capable of stopping that and blowing up the play. So I think that's what he did a great job of doing, of executing tonight. And you saw the Thunder not as comfortable playing out of advantage as they were against Phoenix and the Lakers. But with Shea in particular, again, the Spurs mixed in. I mean, like, Stephon Castle is one of the best Shea defenders in the league. He's on the short list of guys you'd want to throw at SGA in a one-on-one situation. I thought Carter Bryant also did a solid job against him in his 14 minutes when he was matched up with Shea. But it's not just about the one-on-one. Like, it's never going to be primarily just an ISO matchup with Shea. It's also going to be shading him to certain spots on the floor. And for the Spurs, a lot of that is trying to funnel him into areas where Wemby is, so he can just be large, contest, and force Shea to second guess. And I think one of the things that stood out with some of Shea's turnovers and just some of OKC's turnovers in general was San Antonio. I thought they did a brilliant job. Like, a big shout out to Sean Sweeney, assistant coach, defensive coordinator for the Spurs. They did a great job of tracking and mirroring OKC's relocations to the corner, because that's one of the ways that OKC will adjust or will attack out of those doubles, is just a simple relocation of, if someone's up above the break, they will slide down. If someone's more in like the wing area, they'll slide down, and just kind of relocating into Shea's point of view. And it wasn't just Shea, it was several other Thunder ball handlers tonight as well. But the Spurs got a bunch of steals, especially Dylan Harper. Dylan Harper did career high 7 steals tonight. Spurs playoff high 7 steals tonight. He did a brilliant job of reading those actions and stealing the ball. And I thought that was a big issue for OKC at times, was like the safety valve wasn't always there, and you're driving into a thicket of arms, or Wemby's arms, and then you're also trying to make these reads that San Antonio in some ways gave OKC a taste of their own medicine with how quickly they can rotate and how quickly they can scramble. And it like, these two teams on, to some degree are the Spider-Man meme, looking at each other from at least the defensive perspective. I think offensively there are a lot of differences between them. But from a defensive perspective and their overall premise of with OKC, it's a lot of ball pressure and funneling into the Twin Towers or Chet as the primary rim protector. With San Antonio, similar thing. You're going to ball pressure and you're going to force those guys and funnel them into Wemby. And I thought both defenses had some really nice moments, really nice stretches. But I thought that was a key against Shea was they were able to sort of keep him in that we're going to play the 2-on-2 or sometimes double. But then we're also getting out to, you're either spraying out to guys you don't want to be spraying out to. And Alex Caruso, we'll touch on him in a second, had a career night. But outside of that, no one really got going from deep on OKC. Wallace hit one late. Chet hit a couple. But for the most part, OKC, Caruso hit nearly half of their threes. That carried a lot of their offense at times. But I just thought that the defensive game plan against Shea, and then in OT, they started throwing the zone at him. And it depended on the possession. It looked somewhere between a 1-2-2 and a 2-3. And you're obviously going to shape shift that depending on where guys are positioned offensively. But then the zone really stymied OKC, and I thought it was a chef's kiss on the defensive game plan from San Antonio. Like I thought it felt like they were saving the zone for later in the series, or maybe they were saving the zone for just if we're in a situation where we really need to just slow down their offense. Let's throw out the zone. But I mean, you could have already they could have done that, I guess, technically in the late fourth quarter. It felt like it was an ace up their sleeve that they wanted to deploy later in the series. And now OKC has that on film and they'll try to make their counters to that. Speaking of Alex Caruso, though, I mean, this dude, I know a lot of Lakers fans in the chat like that. I mean, they're just constantly reminded of how bad of a decision it was to let this guy walk in 2021. 31 points, a playoff career high, by 11 points. His previous playoff career high was 20. 11 and 19 shooting, 8 for 14 on threes, 2 steals, 2 blocks. And I thought by far did the best job on Victor Wembanyama. I think technically, from a matchup data perspective, it might have been Chet Holmgren, and he had some nice possessions late on Wemby. And I wonder if ultimately they just shift to Chet being the primary matchup, and or at least when Caruso's off the floor, and then Hartenstein being more of the roamer. Hartenstein only played 12 minutes tonight, but Caruso came in, and I mean, he was easily OKC's best player tonight because he was a stud on both sides of the ball. A lot of wide open shots. San Antonio dared him to shoot. So he goes 8 for 14 on threes. And again, most of those were wide open. They started to have some late contests as the game progressed, but they were willing to live with Alex shooting as many open threes as he wanted. And they lost that bet. Now I think overall he could have a series where he shoots low to mid 40s. I don't think it's going to be above 50% for the series. I don't think he's going to be hitting 8 threes every night. So I think it's a bet that San Antonio will continue to make. And maybe if he has another game where he hits like 5 or 6, then they will start to adjust and play him more straight up. But he just the winning plays, like the saving the ball off Wemby, the fronts, and just we saw him do this against Jokic in Game 7 last year. Then we're seeing him do this again. I mean, he's guarding LeBron at times in round 2. He's guarding Wemby and giving up over a foot in terms of a height discrepancy, and just fighting him for position and doing a really good job fronting him, and then also either allowing him to kind of get a step and then swiping down, or as the rotator, helper, if they had JDub on him or if they had Dort on him. I thought Wemby looked much more comfortable in the non-Caruso possessions, and that's a testament to Caruso, and just he's one of the ultimate role players of the modern era, and he's got to go down. If OKC, I mean, they're down 1-0, so I don't want to say like comes back to win the series, but they technically are trailing. If they come back to win this series and win the championship, that'll be Alex Caruso's 3rd championship, and he'll have played a big role in all 3. And dude is just a winner. Like, I really don't know. Like, he just does just like high basketball IQ, high motor, comes up big in big moments. And he carried the Thunder offense at times tonight. Like they could not get much going in the first half, and he immediately stepped in and hit a bunch of shots and made plays in transition. And he was a big part of why this game was remote. Like the game on paper shouldn't have been as close as it was in the first half, but Alex Caruso's shot making was a big reason why. And then I got it. Like we were focused on Wemby and his first conference finals, but we also have to look at Stephon Castle and Dylan Harper. And I think the biggest thing that stood out in my prep for this series, and also stood out just watching game one, is like I think what makes San Antonio such a difficult matchup for OKC is, like, first and foremost, they have Wemby and he's a cheat code on both sides of the ball. But second, their guards and their backcourt, and they didn't even have De'Aaron Fox, who is their max player, their max starting guard, their all-star guard. Like, that's a big piece that even if maybe Harper or Castle, I think they might just have like slightly more athletic advantages than Fox, in part due to size, but in part due to their finishing and their strength in the paint. They still really needed him. And like they barely got to 7 guys tonight. It was the starters plus Keldon Johnson plus Carter Bryant, and then Cornette and Barnes were pretty. I thought Barnes was kind of just meh, and then Cornette was harmful. So San Antonio needs De'Aaron Fox back, and they need him back soon, I think, to ultimately win this series and advance to the finals. But Dylan Harper and Stephon Castle, like for their first conference finals games, Dylan Harper 24 points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists, 7 steals, a career high, and Spurs playoff career high, or Spurs franchise record 7 steals, 8 for 20 shooting, but that was largely because of the 1 for 7 shooting on threes. He was 7 for 13 inside the arc, and his bully ball, finishing on drives, and just his body control, the pace, the decel, and doing it, like a lot of those were. I mean, he had the one play where the pass from Wemby where he just shoulder bumps Chet and shoots a layup over him and scores over him. And like, he just had so many high level finishes tonight, to say nothing of the ball handling under control, the reads, and the defense. And I mean, Harper was, I mean, it depends how you want to classify Caruso or JDub, but if you consider those guys more forwards or guards, whatever, but you can make a case Dylan Harper was the best guard in this game. I mean, it was, I guess, between him and Shea, but like Shea had a pretty rough night. And at least for one game, I thought Dylan Harper, he nearly had he did have a quadruple double, but he was 24, 11, 6, and 7 is ridiculous for a rookie in their first conference finals game. And then Stephon Castle really struggled with the turnovers, 11 turnovers, far too many. And I think that's where the Spurs really missed De'Aaron Fox as the primary ball handler in this matchup in particular. And it's an area of growth for Stephon Castle. But 17 points, 6 rebounds, 11 assists, 1 steal, primary defender on Shea, held Shea to under 30% shooting. Wasn't guarding him on every single shot, but was a big reason why Shea had the performance he had. And he also, with some of his finishing and shot making, provided a big boost for, and like, I mean, he's getting hounded by, like, Castle's getting the Kayshawn Wallace assignment. He had Caruso on him at times. He had AJ Mitchell. He had Dort. I mean, they were rotating through several guys on him. So he was thrown into the proverbial ringer. And we saw, going back to last series, Austin Reeves had a really rough game 1 performance. I would say, despite having like 11 turnovers is an absurd amount. But like, I would still say Castle was better than Austin was in that game 1. But like, you do see that it takes guards some time to figure out the Thunder defense and try to acclimate and just get more comfortable with it. So I do expect Castle to be better in terms of the decision making. But even then, the 17, 6, and 11 and the defense getting to the line consistently. He was awesome tonight as well. So, I mean, between those two guys, 41 points, 17 rebounds, 17 assists, 8 steals, 12 turnovers. Like, I mean, those guys delivered tonight, and they were definitely the second and third best players. But then the entire Spurs supporting cast, Devin Vassell, I think his defense continues to be underrated, and he hit some really timely threes. Didn't have a great shooting night, but felt like every time, like there was late, they're up 91-90. The offense is in the mud. He hits a corner three. He hit some big shots. Julian Champagny also hit some timely threes, had 9 rebounds, a couple blocks. He had a couple, that big block on Chet on putback attempt. And then off the bench, Keldon Johnson, 3 of his 4 makes for threes as well. So their role players played tough defense. They battled in the paint. They battled on the glass, and they came in and hit some threes. So that's all you can ask for from your role-playing wings, and that's exactly what San Antonio got tonight. On the OKC side, talk through some of like JDub. I thought was awesome tonight. Didn't have the most efficient night, but after missing what was it, like almost 3 weeks or so, to be thrown into conference finals against this team, this defense, 26 points, 7 rebounds. He was awesome tonight. And you did see, like, comparing him to AJ Mitchell, that there's a difference in terms of the shot creation there, right? And I think there have been a lot of discourse about, can AJ Mitchell be the guy to replace JDub long term, or can they move on from JDub or whatever? We saw tonight that even for those putting Chet Holmgren above JDub in the pecking order in terms of who's the number 2 on OKC behind Shea, a little bit premature, as we saw tonight. But JDub added another athlete, another defender, another scorer, and one of the few guys who I think looked comfortable at times operating in the mid-range and still creating some shots against San Antonio's ball pressure, and even Wemby in there. Dort had a quiet night offensively, but I thought he had some good defensive stretches, as he does, and battling Wemby, got into foul trouble. Chet was the one who, like, a couple of the big block against Wemby. I think it was the first overtime, if I'm not mistaken, and had some nice contests and was a presence down there, but I don't think was quite to the level that, like, Wemby, just too many dunks, too many layups. Wasn't much Chet could do for a lot of the night. And then 2 for 7 shooting, 2 for 4 on threes, 8 points, 8 rebounds. He averaged I believe it was the second lowest field goal attempts against any opponent was against San Antonio for Chet in the regular season. Then also lowest usage percentage. I think he averaged like 10 shots per game against San Antonio and a 16% usage percentage. So San Antonio's been able to keep Chet under check for the most part this season, and that, like, they're going to need much more from him. They're going to need some 18, 20, 22 point nights, 12, 13, 14 rebounds, and some better rim protection and defense overall. Isaiah Hartenstein got played off the floor to a degree. OKC has not loved playing the too big look against Wemby, but I do wonder with how San Antonio was able to manipulate the floor, manipulate the matchups, get to the rim, draw Chet out, if they're going to have to play a little bit more too big, and Hartenstein can maybe be the last line of defense and Chet be more the guy on Wemby, or maybe you just go to Hartenstein as the guy on Wemby and keep Chet as the low man. Otherwise, Wallace, I thought, did a great job as the primary point of attack guy. 6 rebounds, hit a couple threes. McCain and Mitchell, not playing the Lakers defense, looked a bit more, came back down to earth, playing against an elite defense and guys with a certain amount of athleticism and speed. But I think AJ Mitchell in particular, like, they need to get him going. He had 5 assists, but yeah, he was not the same player that he was in the last series. But with all that said, let's get into Q&A here. Cage Britt, off-season plans are canceled. There's no point. Alien emoji. I wouldn't go that far, but I was texting with some people after the game, and I was like, the fact of the matter is, like, the Lakers have a long way to go. And it's not just the Lakers, it's really the league, because I think whoever you want to put at number 3, that team and whichever one of these teams is number 2 will know by the end of the series that there's a big gap there between the Spurs and Thunder and everybody else. And I think for the Lakers, like, you just have a lot of work to do to really improve this roster. Like, I don't think it's as simple as adding. I've been saying I think they need to add at least 2 starting level players to the roster. And I think that's at a minimum. I think anything under that, you're not doing enough to really improve this group. Connor Phillips, Wemby could end up being the GOAT. Absolutely unreal. Yeah, he like, I think really the only question I have, and I don't want to even put this out there because I want to like knock on wood about this, but really the only thing is with a guy his size, and we've already seen some injury concerns, a little bit with him to start his career. Just guys that size typically play on the high end, like 10 years, 12 years. I think with the advancements in modern medicine and sports science and whatnot, maybe Wemby could stretch that out to like 15 years. But I think anyone ending up the GOAT probably, especially with how long LeBron is going to play, how long Jordan played, and so on and so forth. Like, I think you're going to need to probably play 15 plus years to truly be in that GOAT conversation. You're also going to have to win multiple MVPs, multiple championships, etc. But he, like, in terms of start to the career, especially if he ends up winning the championship, he is on a GOAT-like trajectory. Now he's got to maintain this and he's got to stay healthy. And I know you're saying could here, and that's we're talking like hypothetical, theoretical. I think it's within the realm of possibility, and there are not many players you can say that about. So yeah, I mean, Wemby is that dude. Peter, thank you for the super chat. If I wasn't going to the Champions League final, I would have gone to games 3 and 4 in San Antonio this weekend. These 2 teams are light years ahead of any team. Well, maybe you could go to game 6. Maybe there is a game 6. Who knows? Maybe there won't be a game 6. But yeah, I could not agree more. I think this is the NBA Finals, and it feels like back in the day, I guess going back to 2018, the Rockets Warriors series, where it felt like whoever won that series was going to win the title. That's where I think we're at right now. Like this is the NBA Finals, with no disrespect to New York or Cleveland, and more so New York, because I think New York, especially if they can have a lighter series against Cleveland, maybe they come in and at least are fresher than San Antonio or OKC coming off of a 6 or 7 game war. And maybe they could steal like game 1 and at least make it like pseudo competitive. But realistically, I think whoever comes out of this series is probably winning the finals in at most 5 games. Your boy Rich, thinking of a super chat. This game just made me realize we are so far away. That's where I'm at. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna mince words here. So I do think it depends what the Lakers are able to pull off, and there's so many moving parts. I have a mailbag coming out potentially tomorrow, but probably Wednesday, where I deep dive into the offseason and some of the Lakers options. I'm going to do a bigger deep dive and go into specific scenarios and questions and different things like at some point here soon. But I did do like a bit of an offseason overview in terms of looking at the Lakers cap sheet, what the options are, and the different scenarios in which they'll have some money. So I think it really depends on what the Lakers are able to do, but certainly I think the biggest thing that stands out is like, I just don't, unless the Lakers make some dramatic changes to their rotation and really their roster, like in a grand sense, there's a massive athleticism and speed gap between them and those 2 teams. I would even say there's probably a bigger gap between them and the Spurs in an athleticism sense than even them and the Thunder. But we also saw that materialize in the previous series. So I like on the one, it's not just to me add a couple starters. It's also add starters that can hang with OKC and San Antonio, and that I think requires a baseline level of athleticism, and that does present an interesting thought for me of like, I think Walker Kessler is, for a lot of Laker fans, like their dream center acquisition this summer. But when you compare him to, say, a Jarrett Allen, who just had a monster game 7 against Detroit, or like a Nick Claxton or someone more in that athletic mold, those guys I think are closer to hanging in this series, whereas Walker Kessler might look more like a Rudy Gobert in this matchup, which we just saw what Wemby was able to do to Gobert in the last round. So it is opening my eyes in a multitude of ways in terms of just how I view the Lakers roster path moving forward and what they should do. Marley, thank you for the super chat. I've never seen a back-to-back MVP get subbed out for defense. Also, is Wemby simply best in the world? That was wild to see on live TV. Reminded me of Braun in Boston 2012. Yeah, I mean, the one thing I will say in Shea's defense here is, like, they have so many all defense caliber guys on their team that, like, you could go, I mean, you could throw out a lineup with Dort, Wallace, Caruso. I think even AJ Mitchell is probably a better defender than Shea as well. I mean, JDub, like, I mean, you could go Chet, JDub, Caruso, Dort, Wallace, and that's like an all defense lineup. And I don't think that's necessarily a shot at Shea, because I think there are a lot of guys that, if they were in the exact, like, if you replaced Shea with several other perimeter guys, like, there are some perimeter guys that maybe just make the cut still, but I also think there's several perimeter guys that would be subbed out in that scenario with how Dagnall does his lineups and just the context of where the game was at. Now, it's not a great look, obviously, and you ideally want your MVP to stay out there regardless. And I mean, again, Shea had 5 steals. I don't want to, like, pile on him for the defense, because I don't really think that was a big issue tonight. But in terms of I mean, it's hard not to watch tonight, and, like, honestly, the last few games that Shea has had, game 4 aside, and not think that Wemby is, and this is something I talked about when we had the MVP debate litigation. Like, you could really make a case that Wemby on a per possession basis was the best player in the league this past season. I think that the issue, or like really the only issue, was that he was averaging under 30 minutes per game, and that is unprecedented among MVPs. And part of it was injuries and him coming off the bench and load of management at times and stuff. And it's understandable, but I think that was really it. It was just that you looked at the gap between him and the other MVP candidates, and that there was a real gap there. But if you're just judging on, like, a per possession basis and looking at his metrics, looking at the on-off impact, like, you could make the case that he's the best player in the league and the best player in the world. And after a night like tonight, I'm not going to say no to that. Like, he might've just snatched the crown from Shea, and Shea probably had the crown the last few months at least, but if not, going back to last year. I know for some people, because Jokic had been the favorite to win MVP through December into January, and then Shea became the favorite in January, so that's why I said the last few months. But obviously, you go back to last season when Shea won MVP, Finals MVP. But I mean, there's a chance Wemby snatched it. Like, that, we still got 6 games left, or up to 6 games left. But yeah, he's a beast. Peter notes, think of a super chat, Wemby's kryptonite is Jokic. Yeah. I mean, he had dropped a 40 piece on his head to close the season. And, with the arc on his shot and his floaters and just his unique offensive skill set, he can't attack him. I know you're talking offensively, because obviously defensively, he's not really guarding him. And there's just not much. I mean, he is guarding him, but, like, he's not stopping Wemby. It's more so the offensive end. But yeah, I guess that's one of his. Yeah, we didn't get to see it in the second round, but that's one of his tougher matchups, if not his toughest. Jeffrey J. Cal, thank you for the super chat. Lakers seem like they're years away from being able to compete with these two teams being hyper athletic, long, and defensive. It's a real concern, and it's something that the Lakers are going to have to address. Lakers are going to have to get longer, more athletic, and that's where. I mean, it's because I also look at it from the perspective like what happens. So right now, I think Austin will be back. And I think the most likely scenario is LeBron is back. But if you're looking at it through the lens of like your three best players and the strengths and weaknesses, if you're still going with a core of Luka, LeBron, and Austin, you are at an athleticism deficit overall with those three. You're at a defensive deficit with those three. And so the rest of the roster has to check ideally both of those boxes, but at least one. And that's where we run into a guy like Luke Kennard, for example, where I'm like, he does not check the defense box and he does not check the long athlete box. And so where does Luke Kennard fit into all of this? Rui is an interesting one because I think he checks part of like the length and athleticism box to a degree, although I don't think he does a great job leveraging that on defense. And then I don't think, can check the defense box in certain matchups, but I think he's a very matchup and context dependent defender. So like Rui's kind of an in between there of like not quite sure if he fully checks either box, but like sort of checks each box to a degree. And then Marcus, at least, Marcus checks the defense box. He does not check the athlete box. Now he's big and strong for his size, for his position. So I think when we think of athleticism, we just think of like jumping and speed, and there's different forms of athleticism. But Marcus, I would at most give like a half mark as an athlete, whereas like clearly gets a full mark with the defense. So I think like that's the lens the Lakers have to operate in terms of building their roster is to this point. Like I think you have to really think about it through the lens of like, could they hang on the floor against these two teams? Like that is it, because these two teams are not going anywhere. These two teams could be around for the next 5 years. So they are the standard right now. And it doesn't mean you have to try to copy them, because I think the Lakers are just coming at it from a different build with their best players. Like Shea is not Luka. Wemby is not Luka, but Luka is also not Wemby, and Luka is not Shea, right? Like each player has their own strengths, their own weaknesses, and their own play style that you want to build around. So I don't think you don't try to copy the Spurs or Thunder and build just a worse version of those teams, but you do need a baseline level of athleticism and defense. And I think the Lakers have been deficient in that for years. And now more than ever, it's critical that they start to catch up to those two teams. I think it's almost impossible to fully catch up to them in one offseason. I think that's probably a multi-offseason type project, but it doesn't mean you can't like be far more competitive with them next year if you make the right moves and add the right guys. But finding those guys and actually acquiring them is going to be difficult. Oida Boy says, Wemby the Iceman. I like that. That's I mean, we gotta pay homage to George Gervin is the Iceman, and I know Drake is my guy, and he's and you also got Caleb Williams. So you got multiple Icemen, but the Iceman will always be George Gervin. Doggy or Dougie, I'll say Doggy. Phillips, thank you for becoming a member. Shout out to, or is it Doogie Phillips, because you have the D and the O capitalized. We'll say Doogie. Shout out to Doogie. Peter, thank you for the super chat. Eastern Conference Finals will feel like NCAA play-ins compared to Western Conference Finals. I think it'll be a fun series, and the interesting thing with I would say with the exception of San Antonio, but even San Antonio, you just never know. Like championship windows can be fleeting, and you just never know when you're going to get back to this level. That there's an element of, even for San Antonio, like a certain amount of pressure. But I would say for the other three teams, and particularly the two Eastern Conference teams, because OKC is stamped, they are champions. They've had already the best championship defense that any of the 2020s champions have had, because they're the first 2020 champion to make the conference finals in the following season. The Lakers are the only ones to make it again. None of the other champions have been back since their championship, but outside of the Lakers. But OKC is the first one to make it in the defending championship season. So it would be really disappointing for OKC to lose in the conference finals or to not win the championship. But there's an element of like, they have a long runway here with this window, with their core. And if they don't win it this year, they will have a great chance to win it next year. They'll have a great chance to win it the following year. And like, they're set up for the foreseeable future. With Cleveland and New York, though, like these have been two teams that have been underachieving relative to their talent, rather relative to their internal expectations. And Cleveland finally breaks through, first conference finals since LeBron in 2018, and New York finally breaks through. And it does feel like both teams are in the right in terms of feeling like they should be the favorite, they should be the better team. Like those were the two best teams going into the East from a consensus standpoint in terms of like over under and odds to come out of the East. Like those were the two teams that, but with Indy suffering the injuries they had, like it was Cleveland and New York were perceived to be the two best teams in the East, and they did not. That did not play out in the regular season, but obviously it's playing out now in the East playoffs. But I mean, certainly it's a different level. I'm not gonna say it's gonna look similar because it's just not. That neither team is on the level of OKC or San Antonio. But I think it'll be for the level that they're at. I think it could be a pretty competitive series. Peter, thank you for the super chat. NBA stat leaders this season: points per game, Luka; rebounds per game, Jokic; assists per game, Jokic; blocks per game, Wemby; PER, Jokic; BPM, Jokic; VORP, Jokic; MVP, Shea. I mean, you broke it down well. I guess you could, I mean, most wins, Shea, right? But was not the on-off leader. There might have been a couple, like I don't know EPM off the top of my head if he ended up leading in that, or it might have been Jokic, might have been Wemby. But it is interesting how that played out. Look, I did have a vote this year, and I said Shea was not my MVP. Mint Millions, thank you for the super chat. I love how Wemby has an old school vibe where he doesn't make friends and isn't afraid to talk his talk in the post game. Big fan. Yeah, Wemby is like, he's got some like the WWE showmanship, and it's not over the top, like in your face. It's more subtle. He's kind of got like he's got French flair, let's just say, but he's suave. But it is like, I mean, after some of these plays, like he had the play where he rips the ball from Shea and then he kind of turns back and is sort of taunting Shea, and he was going at Chet, he was going at Caruso. I mean, Wemby is really hard to like. I know some people, some of the stuff that he says, comes off as arrogant or too individualistic or too conceited or whatever. But I think overall, like, dude's about the right things, and he's. I just think like he wants rivalries, he wants competition, he wants beef. Like, I think that's great. I love how earlier in the season he was he was asked about OKC, and he was just like, yeah, like we dominated them this season. And he didn't, like, a lot of times guys will couch it or walk it back or sort of be like, yeah, we found some success. But in the playoffs, it's this. It's like, no, like, basically the undertone was like, we kicked their ass this year. And they did, and they have up to this point. And OKC's on the ropes right now. I mean, I know they have their adjustments, and by no means is this series over, but San Antonio has just objectively had their number this year. Peter, thank you for the super chat. Never forgot in 2021, LA chose THC over Caruso. THC is now playing in Turkey and is doing well in the Euro League, but that was an unforgivable mistake. Yeah, it was this is not revisionist history. This is not hindsight. This is not... hindsight 2020. This is not Monday. I can barely speak right now. Monday morning quarterbacking the situation. I said at the time it was a giant mistake to let Caruso go. I know a lot of Laker fans felt that way, and it has aged terribly. It is just Yeah, I mean, he's the ultimate, whether he's a starter or a bench player, he's the ultimate defensive chameleon and defensive leader that can fit into any team, any situation. Peter says, I love AR, but imagine him against DF, Harper, and Castle. De'Aaron Fox, Harper, and Castle. Yeah, I mean, we kind of saw it. I think he played in only one of the games against San Antonio in the regular season. But it did... So the exception of Castle, like, I think between the two, I think Austin's a better passer than Castle. And, you know, Castle to me, I think is more of a 2-guard than a point guard. And they just handed him the keys of, you know, to the offense tonight because, and he's obviously, you know, they're splitting the duties between him and Fox and Harper to, you know, a large degree, and Wemby's getting his usage. But I think one of the things that stood out was just in terms of the ball handling, like, because Castle had his 11, but Harper only had 1 turnover, and we don't know what Fox would have had in this scenario. But, and you know, maybe we'll see it. Like, it felt like they were more comfortable against OKC's speed and athleticism. Now, I thought Austin progressively looked better in the series, but he just is at an athleticism deficit against both of these teams that there's no real making up. Like, he can battle it with skill, and I think he can figure it out through his skill, but certainly there's some limitations. Mint Millions, thank you for the super chat. Recency bias, but it's the best game I've ever watched just because I think these are two of the better teams we've really seen. Yeah, I cannot hammer home enough the fact that this is the first time 262+ win teams are playing in 28 years. And so, and this was a pretty loaded top of the league this year. This wasn't like I mean, granted, I mean, if you want to be a skeptic, if you want to be a hater, you can say, well, like 10 teams were tanking this year, so that inflated some of the win totals. Sure, that you know, there's some truth to that. I don't know if it specifically applies here because I think San Antonio now is 38-3 in their last 41 games that Victor Wembanyama has played in. Let me repeat that: 38-3. Has played 15 or more minutes in. So. Let me, because there's a couple games where he left early due to injury or whatever, and including the Minnesota game where he got ejected. But in games Wemby has played 15 or more minutes, San Antonio is 38-3 in the last 41 of those games. Like, that is, we were talking, that's a 76 win pace. That is absolutely absurd. And so some of that, sure, might be beating up on lesser teams, but part of that's also just Wemby's pretty great, and they have figured something out here. And honestly, OKC is not too far behind in terms of the last X amount of games that Shea has played. So, yeah, I mean, these are two of the best teams of the 2020s. I think in OKC's case, one of the best teams post 2000. But if San Antonio beats them, then, like, what does that say about San Antonio, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think we got, like, we have Lakers Celtics finals in 2010. We have Cavs Warriors 2016. We have that Rockets Warriors series in 2018. There's certainly some series that we could go to that have been great. I think some of those, like Boston Miami games. But yeah, I mean, I think that this is this is in the upper echelon of just as good as it gets, basically. Mr. Starlin, thank you for the super chat. M. Robinson should be on Lakers priority list now. He's on my priority list now. I can tell you that. But he should be on the Lakers priority list, especially if you could get him $15 to $18 million. I think that is it's a notable upgrade over DA in regards of, I think he can do, like, he doesn't have the touch. He's not the scorer that DA is, but he used to be a better lob threat earlier in his career. He's regressed a bit with his athleticism and some of his finishing. So I'd be curious to see what that looks like with Luka and Austin. But I think the defense is definitely better. He's tougher. He's more physical. There's a nastiness to Mitchell Robinson that I think the Lakers could use. Gary Singh, thank you for the super chat. Paying AR $40 million won't let Lakers compete with these teams. He's too much of a liability defensively, but Lakers can't let him walk, so gotta sign and trade him. Just to reiterate, and I assume you might be aware of this, but I'm just going to continue to reiterate this. Austin's contract is not going to impact LA's cap space. I will have a breakdown more on this soon, and I have already broken this down in the past, but the Lakers are keeping Austin, like the whole cap space premise is LA is keeping Austin on his cap hold, then making moves, then re-signing him. So whether it's $41 million at his absolute max starting out, or whether it's $30 million at, I think, like realistically the lowest number that the Lakers would offer that he would agree to, that $11 million gap, really just a matter of, does Mark Walter pay does he pay $11 million more, or is it 35? He pays $5 million more. Like, it actually does not. It's not like, oh, if Austin signs for $30 million, the Lakers all of a sudden have all this extra cap space. That's not. Their cap space is completely separate from Austin. The only exception would be, to this point, if they sign and trade him, which, remember, Austin has to agree to that. Austin, you can't force a player to be signed and traded, or they just let Austin walk. But to your point, they're not letting Austin walk. So I still think that the most realistic scenario here is going to be re-signing Austin, reevaluating the situation down the road, and then potentially trading him if they don't feel like he and Luka fit together longer term. But then I guess the second most likely scenario would be him a sign and trade, and then the third would just be them letting him walk. I do not see LA, like, I'll say if they get too cute with the negotiations, that's always a risk of they're not like letting him walk. He's just choosing to walk if they get cute with it. But we'll see. David, thank you for the super chat. Given your analysis, should the Lakers bring back Rui, Marcus, AR, Luke, given their imbalance between offense and defense, need a real stretch center to pull Wemby out? The only thing with this would be, or the last part would just be, they could, depending on who's out there, they could still just put Wemby on, like, tonight, for example, they're putting Wemby on Caruso, they're putting Wemby on Dort, and they're daring those guys to shoot. So I think even if you can't force, I mean, unless you just have like 4 lights out shooters at the other 4 positions, you can't force Wemby to guard a shooter and be dragged out of the paint, right? Like San Antonio's, they could potentially go to a zone, or they're going to find some counter of, they're not just going to be like, all right, Wemby, hang out in the corner and attack us off the dribble and get to the rim. Like, they're going to counter that. So I think even if you have a stretch big, that does not necessarily mean that Wemby is going to match up with that stretch big, if that makes sense. To this point, so you're asking Rui, Marcus, AR, Luke. I think where I'm getting at, I think Luke is probably the odd man out here. I think he's the worst of the 4, and he just doesn't check enough of what LA, like, I think with Austin, I think Austin's a better defender than Luke, but I also think there's a big offensive gap between them in terms of shot creation and ball handling, passing reliability. And so I don't even think it's really a conversation between Austin and Luke, but I'm just stating that, like, Austin, I think is maybe closer to Luke defensively than Marcus is, and maybe Rui, depending on the night, depending on the matchup. But Austin, I think, has just so many more strengths compared to Luke, and does even their weaknesses. I think Austin does the weaknesses better. So I would have put Austin to the side from this, because I don't think the Lakers are considering not keeping Austin. I think the conversation really is Rui, Marcus, and Luke. And between those 3, I would say Luke's the odd man out, and then you could have a conversation between Rui and Marcus. Rui's a better shooter. He is younger. He is bigger. He is more athletic, and he gives you a certain consistency offensively. And then defensively, he can match up with some bigs and some wings, ideally not like primary scoring, ball handling wings. With Marcus, we know, like, offensively, the shot can come and go, does give you some ball handling and passing. I think it sometimes have blinders on offensively, but you could also say the same thing for Rui. And then defensively, multi-positional defender. I think was the heart and soul of LA's defense, defensive captain, defensive leader. So between the two, I would lean Marcus, especially if he's cheaper, which I think he will be. But it's tough to let Rui walk after the playoffs he had. So I would ideally like to keep both of those. But if it really comes down to like adding a better two-way wing or Rui, I think I would lean the two-way wing. JV, thank you for the super chat. The high level of guard defense needed to compete at the level we watched tonight is the only reason I hesitate about building with AR going forward. I think this is so, I don't want to relitigate all the Austin stuff. And I think most of the people who consistently tune in know how I feel about Austin, know how I view Austin, but I'm not opposed to Austin criticism. And I'm not opposed to people who, if you give me a legitimate reason why it is not going to work, like I think there are reasons to be concerned with the potential Luka Austin pairing and why it might not work, and reasons that the Lakers really should be weighing. And I think this might just be the biggest one is that now I'm glad you didn't mention Luka in here, because I think people often equate those two being guards offensively to those two being guards defensively. But if you watch Luka's matchups, Luka's rarely defending guards. Luka's almost always defending a front court player. So he's a front court player defensively. Austin is the one who is a guard defensively. And yeah, I mean, you just think about, again, if you compare the amount of athleticism and defense that these two teams have, and then you say, just as a starting point, if you're going Luka, Austin, LeBron, you need to make up that gap at such a high level at the other two positions. And that's just something that I don't know how the Lakers are going to end up pulling that off. So that to me would be the most like credible reason to if it just might not work defensively ultimately. And I think the Lakers want to see a larger sample size and want to see what they could do in terms of the offseason and who they can acquire and how they could build out this group. But certainly I think this is to me, I had a mailbag come out yesterday and I talked through some of Austin's playoff success and shortcomings against OKC and his success and shortcomings in prior postseasons and tried to have a balanced perspective on his playoff track record. But it ultimately just might be like the Austin Luka pairing. I think offensively, I have like very few questions. Really, like they both have to be better with the turnovers, and then Austin I think has to shoot better in playoffs, and like that has to be something that he just maintains from the regular season better. But all the questions on the defensive side and just the overall athleticism and can you build a defense of a certain level with those two guys? Then if you're adding a 41-year-old into the mix, soon to be, or not soon to be, but like midway through, you're just at a certain level of you need a lot better athleticism. And that's why I keep going back to you need guys who defend and are athletes. And if you're not, ideally you're checking both boxes, but if you're not checking at least one, it gets hard to keep you on the team. Now, Austin, I think, is an exception in the sense of he's so valuable and important to the team offensively, but that's not to, like he also has to be better defensively. And I think like that's just what it is. So yeah, I think that if you want to make that case, I think this would be the primary thing that would be the thing I'm evaluating of like, can it work with those, with that roster build? LA824, thank you for the super chat. Do you think if the Lakers built a roster to match up well with OKC, they'd become a worse matchup against the Spurs and vice versa? It's not necessarily, because I think it depends how you view it, right? Because there are like OKC has Shea, which I think takes a certain type of defender and defensive scheme, and then San Antonio's Wemby, which I think is its own problem, right? So their two best players each present completely different problems for you to try to problem solve. But so I think from an offensive perspective, no, from a defensive perspective, potentially. From an offensive perspective, I said it earlier in the show, I view them as the Spider-Man meme because it's ball pressuring, ball hawking, athletic guards and wings, and then elite rim protection behind them. So a lot of why OKC and San Antonio can afford to ball pressure and gamble at times and play so aggressively is because they know if you get beat, you're running into a 7'7" wall. Whereas most other teams, you're running into a 6'10" to 7 foot wall. And also, you're adding in the magnitude of his arms and his reaction time and all the stuff that makes Wemby such a great defender. So it's just different. It's different when DeAndre Ayton is on the back line versus when Victor Wembanyama is on the back line, right? And Chet is the second best rim protector in the league behind Wemby right now. So I think from an offensive attack standpoint, I think you need to be able to attack their guards and be able to create separation against their guards and shot create against their guards. And also factor in where's Wemby, where's Chet, like far more where's Wemby than Chet. But Chet had some pretty good defensive stretches in that Lakers series and was a real factor on that end. But I would say defensively, it's a little bit different because San Antonio is going to attack you with their speed in terms of Harper and Castle and Fox in a way that I think is slightly different to Shea can do that in JDub, but they're a bit bigger. So I think it's you ideally are putting different size defenders on them. But I mean, the issue is there's a Wemby problem here where I just don't know how you match up with that guy. The Lakers ultimately had a pretty good defensive game plan against Shea. They didn't have the best personnel to execute it, and they ultimately had to adjust within the series against Shea. But I don't think so. I think there are a lot of similarities between these two teams. Of course, that's an oversimplification, and there are some real differences. But I think in a general sense, you need athletes, you need defenders, you need quick decision makers. And with OKC, it's more, I would say with OKC, it's more the swarming. And you saw them, a lot of the turnovers tonight were live ball turnovers, San Antonio dribbling into traffic, San Antonio dribbling into arms and hands. And with San Antonio defensively, it is much more about Wemby just takes up the entire paint and it's a no-fly zone. And so I would say how you attack their defense is different. And then OKC is a bit more mid-range heavy, but I don't know. I don't think necessarily trying to attack or build for one means you can't do the same thing against the other one. Connor Phillips, thank you for the question. Do you think the dominance OKC and San Antonio have shown this postseason will lead to more teams making moves this offseason? Would be great for us. Do you mean what do you mean by lead to more teams making moves? As in to ramp up to battle them, or as in feeling helpless, defeated, and trading guys off? Perry says the counter to Wemby is off the dribble threes, and Luka has that. If OKC has a chance this series, SGA is going to have to shoot way more threes. That's a good point. I think Luka and Wemby. I mean, Luka and Jokic. 5 more minutes here. And ... Giannis is a great matchup for Wemby. Yeah, I have wondered lately, and lately as in the past couple hours, if seeing how things played out tonight, it does make the Giannis conversation a little bit more interesting of just, I don't see a scenario in which the Lakers can build a top 8 or top 9 that is on par with OKC or San Antonio, at least within this offseason. But can you go get Giannis, and can a Luka Giannis combination at least be like for as great as I love Castle, he's one of my favorite players in the league to watch. For as great as Chet is, for as great as JDub is, like Luka and Giannis is a better two-man combination than Shea plus whichever other Thunder player or Wemby plus whichever other Spur. Now, those teams have better top-end depth and better depth overall, but I think that might be one of the pathways, one of the very narrow pathways for LA to actually make a dent in those matchups. It might be, all right, well, we're gonna have Giannis to attack Wemby, and we're gonna have Giannis to attack Chet, and that might be the way you go about it. Because I don't know, I think kind of running it back is a little concerning. Matt, Jovan, when do you think the Lakers can really compete for a title? 2 to 3 years. OKC, San Antonio are going to be so good for the next 3 to 5 years. Do you think the Lakers should re-sign AR and try to trade him? I think where I'm at with the Lakers competing is I think it's probably a 2-year process. I think they'll be really good again next year and maybe have a puncher's chance in a series against either one of these teams. But I think to really get to this level, I think it might have to take 2 off seasons. Maybe that's too negative. I don't know, but I think I've said I think the Lakers are going to make a move this summer, but I don't know if they can. I think they're more than one move away, and maybe they. If they could find a way to add 2 starters and keep LeBron and keep Rui and keep Marcus and then get some vet minimum bargains, it's a different conversation. But barring a transformative offseason like that, where you get multiple guys to take discounts, you get the 2 position needs you need, and you also add some bargain, for example, how Denver got Bruce Brown and Tim Hardaway Jr. Those guys were awesome for them on minimum contracts. Can you get bargains like that are rotation level guys that can play in the playoffs, can have moments for you? THJ was a 3rd and 6th man of the year. Bruce Brown had some moments for them in the short-lived Minnesota series. Can you find that type of value with the minimum contracts? Because I think LA's been pretty hit or miss with their minimum signings over the last few years. That would be it. I think if it's just running it back, I was curious to know, what would it have looked like if LA had been healthy and they had played Minnesota in round 1 and then they'd played San Antonio in round 2. I think at full strength, against the full strength OKC, that's a 5-game series. But San Antonio, it might have also been a 5-game series. Maybe it's a 6-game series, but I think we are now seeing San Antonio. It was clear OKC was in a different class than the Lakers, but San Antonio might even be better than OKC, and that would theoretically, by the transitive property, put San Antonio at a different level as well. And so, yeah, I mean, the Lakers could very well enter next season as the 3rd best team in the NBA, but there on paper will be a pretty big gap between number 2 and number 3, and I think it might be a couple of off seasons until it might be going to 2027-28 when they're more equipped to actually beat one of these 2 teams, but we'll see. I think it's too early to tell without knowing how that's me projecting what the offseason could look like. They could very well exceed expectations and make a bunch of incredible moves, and I would have a different perspective after that. I'm just telling you based on my current perspective and current projection of what I think the offseason is going to look like. That's sort of where I'm at. Right now, I would peg them as the 3rd best team going into or 3rd best West team going into the season next year. But you don't get a bronze medal for that. You don't get a trophy for that. It's you have to be the best team. And then, the thing with Austin here is, are you saying a sign and trade, or are you saying retain him and then potentially trade him? I am of the mindset that you retain him and then you evaluate things and then you potentially flip him if you want to flip him, or if that's the right move closer to the deadline or next offseason. That would be my read. Like, I would love to see what Luka and Austin look like in another postseason. And then if it just doesn't work, you move on. And then next one from Chuck Dangler. Thank you for the super chat. Ayo Buha, sup brate? My buddy who's a Spurs fan was crying today in happiness. Did you see Shams talking about Braun getting calls from teams? Hope all is well. P.S. You still owe me an email. Haha. I do owe you an email. And I did see Shams' report on LeBron. I thought it was interesting. I'm curious, like, because he said all contenders. So by that virtue, that indicates the Spurs and the Thunder, theoretically, right? I wouldn't be surprised by Cleveland or New York, because there's been some buzz and he's been tied to those two teams over the last year or so. But it's now the one caveat I would add in is, like, getting calls and attention from the teams does not mean max contract, does not mean $40 million contract, does not mean $30 million contract. So, like, I still think if LeBron ends up going elsewhere, it's going to be really difficult for him to get the type of money that the Lakers can offer, even on, like, the lower side. Like, there's very few teams or it's going to be very difficult for any of the teams that LeBron is interested in to get to, like, even $20 million to offer him. So if the Lakers are only interested in offering him $20 million, he could certainly take that as disrespectful and be offended by that and decide to leave off of that. But I think any of these teams interested in him are really going to struggle to get to that 20 million in cap space. So you could sign and trade technically, and then that hard caps the team, though. So you have to have a certain cap sheet. You have to have a certain amount of flexibility to do a sign and trade. I think it's a pretty narrow list of, like, realistic scenarios that could pay him as much as the Lakers. If he's willing to take a major discount for that, then that's a different story. And again, we'll see what happens with that. But shout out your friend. I mean, he should be celebrating tonight. That was a great win for the Spurs. Civic Citizen, thank you for the super chat. Great content as always. Thanks for everything you do. I appreciate that. I'm sorry about the Wi-Fi. I have no idea what's going on. I've not had Wi-Fi issues in a very long time, but I know it's been a bit laggy. Appreciate you guys still rocking with me. Matt says AR can't be number 2 on a championship team. Do you agree? I'm not fully there, but I've been saying that I think the best, his best slotting would be a number 3. So I think, like, if a team wins a championship with Austin on it, I think it would probably be as a number 3. Enarchs, no, I'm moving like I'm frozen. This might get me. I might finally just switch internet. I was going to, and then now this probably gave me the final push. Quang asks, what gettable center matches up well versus Wemby? I mean, there's kind of not really a center that. Let me quickly look this up. I'm going to look up Wemby's matchup data, which is imperfect, but just curious to see. So regular season, I will say Wemby on offense. So among the double-digit minute guys who spent double-digit minutes matched up against Wemby, it's only a list of 9. So Draymond defended him for 25 minutes. He shot 49% against Draymond. Yusuf Nurkic, he shot 57%. Bam, he shot 45%. Kenrich Williams, 78%. Duran, 56%. Jalen Williams, 50%. Diabate, 41%. Nick Claxton, 38%. Ding, ding, ding. We might have the winner here with Nick Claxton. Brooke Lopez, 27%. And then if you go down, Şengün, 39%. I mean, there's going to be some noise and some randomness here. Aaron Gordon, 25%. Colin Murray Boyles. So that's interesting that like I guess some of the stockier, beefier forwards, you know, the fours or like undersized fives gave him some problems. Like Tari Eason, 17%. Again, these are very small sample sizes that I don't want to extrapolate too much from, but I think in general, looking at, he cooked a lot of the bigger, slower centers or undersized wings, and then some of those stockier, like the fact that Şengün and Gordon and Sadiq Bey and Tari Eason and Rui, he shot 40% against Rui. Like some of these guys, he shot, let's see what I just saw, Caruso shot 40% against Caruso. So like, I guess some of the guys that are a bit stronger and can get into his body, I think it's kind of similar to Kevin Durant to a degree. But Nick Claxton's an interesting one at 38% on, he shot 6 for 16 against Nick Claxton. That's, I mean, I mentioned earlier, I've been wondering if Claxton or Allen is more the move of like a more athletic, mobile big. And then maybe you make up the size, like, or in strength off the bench. Rip Van Winkle, is Luka more talented than Shea in your opinion? Yes, I think that's clear. L. Parker says Nick Claxton is too small. It's barbecue chicken. I mean, I would prefer Jared Allen. I recently said I'd prefer Nick Claxton more so because of the contract, but the more I've thought about it, I've changed my opinion on that. I'd prefer Jared Allen. Gabe says reboot your Wi-Fi. The problem is the Wi-Fi is at the beginning or the front of my house. I'm in the back of my house, so that's my issue right now. See, I would disagree with this from Raw, and he says Clax is Jax, but a little better. I think he's a lot better than Jackson. He's a much better rebounder than Jackson. I think he's a much better rim protector than Jackson, and I think he's more skilled offensively as a passer. And I think he's been just kind of thrown into Siberia and Brooklyn. But now I would say the part of this I agree with is I think he's got similar strength or weaknesses to Jackson in terms of being overpowered by bigger guys. And that's where like, you do need to make up for that power and strength elsewhere. Rip Van Winkle asked about stretch 5 versus 1B. Yes and no, because I mean, yes, in the sense that we saw when he guarded Chet, he got dragged out to the corner, right? And he didn't want to help off of Chet. But the issue is if you give San Antonio a place to hide him, if you give any shaky shooter at all, they'll just put Wemby on that player. So I think like in the regular season, it might not matter. It might be more conventional, might not throw out their defensive strategy, but in a playoff series, it will become who's the shaky shooter that you can hide Wemby on. TW, who did you pick for the series and how many games? I posted this on YouTube on the community or post tab. I picked OKC in 7, and within that 7, within that pick, I did expect San Antonio to come in and win tonight. I mean, they've had OKC's number, but also they're coming off of playing more recently. And I think we saw with OKC versus the Lakers, they were a little, like it took them a little bit to adjust in game 1. And they seem to be a group that when they have a big absence, they just have not, like it takes them a little bit to rev up. And I thought we saw that progressively throughout the course of the game. So I'm not going to change my pick after one game, although I would say like probably the most likely scenario right now is probably San Antonio in 6. But yeah, I mean, I think game 4, game 3 and game 4 will be huge, of course. I mean, game 2 is like every game is big, but like I would assume OKC comes back and wins game 2 and ties it. If San Antonio wins, then all bets are off in terms of what's going to happen. And like it's probably San Antonio. It just matters how many games. But like I would assume OKC wins, and then game 3 obviously can go either way. But then like game 4 is really like, is someone going up 3-1 or is it tied 2-2? And then you go back to OKC for game 5. But I would still stick with OKC in 7. I think they like Chet and Shea, I think will both play much better than they did tonight, but Alex Caruso is not going to play as well. And maybe JDub doesn't play as well. But like, I guess if you want to be an optimist from the OKC side, Shea, Chet, and AJ Mitchell all did not play anywhere close to their normal performance in the playoffs. And this was still a double overtime game that OKC was in until the final minute and a half. Whereas San Antonio, I mean, they had their own stuff with, they didn't shoot the ball that well. No Fox. Castle had a million turnovers, but Wemby had an all-time performance. And I think he's going to have big performances in this series, but it just felt like I would say this would have changed my opinion. Had OKC won, I would have felt a lot worse about San Antonio, only because I felt like they controlled the entire game, and the fact that they couldn't close it, like it would almost be like you had to win 5 games in the series. Of now you got to win 4 of the final 6, and you already kind of won the game, but you weren't able to finish it. So I think San Antonio like needed to win this game, which they did. They took care of business, stole home court advantage, and so I'm still going to stick with OKC in 7, but if you pick San Antonio, you got to be feeling good about that. Connor says there's coat for both sides. Certainly, a lot of coat for both sides. Smokey says both teams very resilient. I would agree. Yeah, I mean, what it comes down to for me is like it's twofold. It's OKC when they're at their best can put a lot of pressure on the rim and the paint, and the Spurs cut that off with Wemby. But then on top of that, OKC has an athletic advantage in the backcourt against basically every team in the league except San Antonio. They're one of the few teams that you can go athlete for athlete on the perimeter and be like, we can hold our own. And in some cases, we have an advantage against you. And that, I think it's like those two things of with Wemby out there, OKC shot quality falls off a cliff. I didn't end up doing a series preview for this. They had a 99 offensive rating against Victor Wembanyama in the regular season. Like they could not score when Wemby was on the floor against San Antonio in the regular season. And tonight, as a group, they had a 102 offensive rating, which I'm going to assume then that with Wemby on the floor, they probably had a mid-90s offensive rating. So, I mean, the biggest point of concern for OKC, in my opinion, would just be they have not been able to score consistently or anywhere near a level that they should or will need to score at to win this series against like when Wemby has been on the floor. And that's been a trend all series or, all season. So OKC's going to have to figure some things out offensively. The crazy thing, Connor, with this is, I agree with you. He says OKC's path to victory is hitting a high percentage and volume of threes and forcing a ton of turnovers. Outside of that, the only thing I would say to this is if I told you before the game that if this is all you knew, I told you that San Antonio forced 23 turnovers for the Spurs and scored 28 points off of those 23 turnovers. And they shot 17 for 45 on threes. They shot 38%. They made 17. Those are both good numbers. You would think on paper, OKC won that game. If you hear a bunch of San Antonio turnovers, a bunch of OKC threes, that's how OKC should win in this matchup. And they still lost and only led 7% of this game. That would be concerning. So you guys are convincing me to switch to the San Antonio side here. I'm going to stand strong with the OKC in 7, but it's not looking great for them. Gary Singh, I think of a super chat. So funny how some OKC players that were dominating Lakers are not even playable in this series. You think Utah will match Lakers for Kessler at 35? Yeah, I mean, everyone turns into a pumpkin when they're not playing the Lakers. That's just how it goes. 35, I think, is high enough to get Utah to sweat and consider it. So I'm sure there's a number where they will for sure not match. I would guess that's probably anything above 35. 35 is probably fringe, but I think they would at least have to consider not matching that. But anything like 30, 32, I think they probably match that. So that's probably the area the Lakers have to go for Kessler. All right. I'm going to wrap here, though. Appreciate you guys for rocking with me. Appreciate the patience with the lagging connection. I will get that fixed ASAP. I will be back tomorrow for Lakers Collective at 11 a.m. Pacific. We're going Tuesday and Friday this week. Then I will be back either later in the day or on Wednesday with a new mailbag. And then might go live tomorrow night after Knicks Cavs game 1 and do another one of these. And then maybe drop the mailbag Wednesday and then nothing Thursday, and then back for Lakers Collective and maybe something else on Friday. But shout out to the chat. Shout out to the late night gang. Appreciate you guys. And I will talk to you all very soon.